the first presenters. It's like 5 dangerous things that every school should measure. 5 cose pericolose che ogni scuola dovrebbe misurare. Sono Gever Tulley e Luigi Anzivino. Welcome on stage.
Okay. Thank you. Give us a minute to get this set up. You can vamp.
How is everybody this morning? Excited? Okay.
Okay. And
We're going to show you our most favorite things this morning.
excellent. Welcome, everybody. It's so exciting to be here and to be speaking with you. My name is Luigi Anzivino. I am Italian, but I will be speaking in English for this presentation, which is, as you see from the photo, titled 5 Dangerous Things Every School Should Measure. And I think I want to start, it's a provocative photo for a provocative title, and I want to start with the provocative question, which is, what is learning? And that's because in my 24 years of going to school, I developed an understanding of what teaching and learning is that no longer feels relevant to me. I do not think that anymore. What I used to think learning looks like is this. There are teachers who have knowledge, and there are students who lack knowledge. And the job of the teacher, more or less, is to transfer that knowledge from them to the students so they can have the same knowledge that they have. Because what is important is knowledge and the having of it. I also thought this process is largely linear. You go from not knowing something, and then you gain more knowledge, and also finite. At some point, you're done learning it. And the goal of teaching is to turn a student into somebody that has more or less the same knowledge that you do, so that then they can take it further or teach it to others. But I don't think that anymore. What happened is I discovered the Exploratorium. The Exploratorium is a museum of science, art, and human perception in San Francisco, California. And it is designed and organized around a strange principle that is that learners already are competent, curious, and capable of finding answers to their own questions. And so when you take this premise and you try to develop activities that are exploring science, art, and technology, following this principle, what you end up with is the Tinkering Studio. This is where I've been working for the last 18 years. And those activities will look something like this. They will look like marble runs and circuits made on paper and giant collaborative chain reactions and stop-motion animations that are large scale and more. And having experienced the power of this approach for myself for 18 years, it has changed the way that I think about teaching and learning. And now I think that that looks maybe a little bit more like this. There are so many different ways of knowing things, and learning proceeds by stops and starts and wrong directions, and it is created in the relationship that we have with each other and with the subjects that we are trying to learn about. And when you take this powerful approach and you think about how to teach it, it opens up new and innovative ways of teaching. So this is what I've been doing for a long time, and often the question that is asked of us is, yes, that sounds great, but how do we know it works? And that's the question that we're here to try to answer. While I was developing this, along with others, Gever was on his own path.
While Luigi was reinventing the aspect of learning for himself through those experiences, I started a parallel research project in my own way by inviting 8 children to come and stay on my property at my house while I launched a new kind of summer camp back in 2005. These 8 students arrived, and I taught them how to use tools, and I had one idea that I thought would be the project for the camp. I thought we should build a bridge. And what I discovered was, at the end of the first day, we had a bridge. And this was the end of my big plan for everything we had planned for the week. So I asked them, what should we build next? And they said, roller coaster. This was a crucial turning point for me, the realization that I could make plans with the students, not for them. Well, we spent a week building this amazing roller coaster with 40 meters of track. They rode it, their parents rode it, and we discovered that working together on a project that we came up with together without a plan, just a feeling that it was going to be awesome, we achieved the highest levels of student engagement. Over the years, over the last 20 years, our projects had become more grandiose, more amazing, culminating in this moment where we built an aircraft out of materials you can buy at the hardware store. The experience at the camp and talking with the kids about how bored and stressed out they were at school, and then seeing how dedicated they were to these projects, to getting all of these crazy ideas working. And then this young woman asked a question that would not leave my mind. She said, simply, why can't school be more like camp? I decided to see if I could answer that question. And of course, I started with a sketch. And 1 year later, we opened Brightworks in San Francisco, a school for a community of learners who all know and care for each other and then choose big ideas to work on together. The environment of the school is built by and with the students. The entire community participates, parents coming in, everybody helps to build and create the learning environments. And we encourage projects that have a defined success metric. If a student is building a boat, then the proof of success is obvious. And we are there to help them to learn to assess their own work. The learning is so visible that no one even thinks of making students take a test. Our motto, everything is interesting, reminds us that we should not judge the curiosity of the child. Everything is interesting and worth exploring. But there's a wrinkle. Over the last decade, I've noticed something interesting. In the admissions process, when we're interviewing new families, we often start the conversation with the question, what do you want for your child? And the most common answer we get is, we just want her to be happy. I love this answer, but it doesn't seem to fit the evidence, because when ultimately that family is leaving the school, many parents tell us that they are leaving for more academic rigor. Somehow, conversations in education always come back around to the topic of testing. And for the last 100 years or so, we've been optimizing the school experience, not for the benefit of the student, but for the test scores. So, here is all of the research around, all of the data around test scores from all around the world, summarized by me. Put in simple terms, there is a small percentage of us who did really well in school. It's about 20%. In some countries it's smaller, in some countries it's bigger, but in general it's about 20%. These people go to the best universities, and there's another 20% over here for whom school was essentially meaningless. They got almost nothing out of being there. It was just something that they endured, that they put up with. School for them was just a thing to get through. And in the middle, we have a group of people who did okay. Anybody who did okay in school? Yeah. It's about 60%. They didn't hate school, but they didn't really succeed. Some people look at this chart and they say, school is working. These people in the middle just need to work harder. I look at this chart and I say, school fails for 80% of students who go there. Why aren't we trying to make a school that works for everyone? So, we all remember the endless anxiety of constantly taking all those tests and the impact that this has on the mental health of students. You know who's good at taking tests? AI. ChatGPT gets to go to any university it wants to. So, it has become clear that a different approach to assessment is needed, and what should we measure becomes a critical question.
So we, at the Tinkering Studio, kind of tried to tackle this question in a very rigorous way. We embarked on a 2-year project that was done in collaboration with our research and evaluation department. What we did is we looked at hours and hours of footage of tinkering activities and then had endless conversations to try to figure out what are some indicators that learning is happening. And in the end, we ended up with these 5 dimensions of learning. And there's a lot here, so I don't expect you to take it all in, but I will point out that we did some pretty deep analysis, and we ended up with some categories that look pretty similar to what foremost schools value and measure, and then others that are quite different. And I'm going to focus on those for just a second. But the really important part is actually this little bit of language on the left that no one ever reads. And what that actually says is that this is not a tool to evaluate the learner. This is a tool to evaluate whether a tinkering experience supports learners showing up in these categories. So does the context that we've created support the kind of learning that we want to see? And we really care that learners can set up their own goals, choose which problems to work on, try something risky, and adjust if they decide to or need to. We also, when we look at creativity, it means for us playfully exploring with the intent of making something beautiful, not just something functional, but also expressing something personally meaningful to them and maybe coming from their culture and background. And when we're looking at the socio-emotional aspects of learning, we think that it's really rooted in collaboration, where the student can become the expert and maybe teach others as well, and often walk away with a sense of pride and ownership in what they've accomplished. So this has been a very useful tool for us to think about our own practice. And if we don't see these dimensions emerge, we know that we have to change something about what we've presented to better support our learners. And of course, a museum has the privilege of being a space that is largely free from having to evaluate and assess their visitors. So how did you apply this in a school setting?
So 2 different pathways, and Luigi and I have converged on what for me was 20 years of working with students without tests, without homework, doing crazy big projects. We ended up with these 5 things that we think are worth measuring. And when made the focus of an educational system, these would have a transformative, positive impact on the life of the students and our future society. So the first thing we're going to pay attention to in school environments is the presence of joy. Let's make sure that school is a joyful place to be. If our memories of school are not joyful, we will associate learning with boredom and pain. And now, more than ever, we need young minds to be excited about learning new things. The next thing we look for in the environment, agency. If we want them to change the world, we don't want them to wait for permission to start. Let's get with the change now. Third thing that we need to pay attention to, the simple realization that we cannot accomplish anything without the collaboration of others, that we need to learn how to work together. So let's pay attention to how students and staff work together. Collaboration is at the heart of adult success, and we need to start practicing it early. Next, let's look at creative capacity. By all measures, students are orders of magnitude more creative in kindergarten than they are when they graduate to go to college. Why is that? We're throwing away a national resource, the creative capacity of children. Lastly, engagement. In order for a school to have impact, the students must be engaged, and this is what we should measure. Disengagement is a form of apathy, and we should understand it as a critical diagnosis of the experiences we are creating in school. It's not the student's fault. So, these two different pathways, two different sets of research come together, and we may express it in different ways, but these ultimately are the metrics for a truly 21st century school. And as Luigi has pointed out, we actually measure the school and not the student. Schools with higher scores in these areas are more likely to be healthy places for students to develop into adulthood with the skills and the personal strengths and habits to live happily and have a positive, productive impact on the world. Think back to your own experience at school. How would that school you went to score on these tests? Whatever comes next, we will need to be less like computers and more like humans, and our schools should reflect that. Thank you. Next up.
Hello. I'm not really from an educational background at all. For the last 25 years, I've mainly been making arcade machines. I've got 2 arcades, and I've made about 45 of them in all. I'm going to talk about the process of making my latest one, which is called Dead or Bad. Oh, perhaps I'll have to press next. Oh, okay. Okay. This is a video, so if we could play the video. So Lizzie is turning the handle to generate green electricity to keep the fire alight, to keep Granny warm through a cold night. And the weather gets worse and it gets harder and harder to turn the handle. Then the flashing light goes on, and because Granny's nearly dead, and then a petrol pump rings out. Now, then the audio gives you a choice. You either have to persevere turning the handle and see if you can put in more energy to keep the fire alight, or you can just opt for the easy option and pull the trigger on the petrol pump. Well, I had to pause the video because Lizzie didn't pause. She instinctively reacted for the pump. Carry on the video. So, of course, Granny immediately gets warm again.
She's warming up.
But, of course, her carbon footprint, Lizzie's carbon footprint, is now shooting up. So she ends up bad.
Oh, bad.
If she'd resisted the temptation and carried on turning the handle, then it's touch and go. If she doesn't do it hard enough, Granny dies, hence the dead. So that's my latest machine. And I suppose it's fairly nutty and obviously creative. They're all sort of satirical comments on the crazy world we live in, really. And so I suppose this one is sort of green idealism meets reality. But they also have to be quite serious bits of engineering. This is the control panel for the machine. My arcades are quite popular, and so many of the machines have been used hundreds of thousands of times. So they have to be very strongly made. They obviously have to be safe, and they have to be reliable. So they are actually quite serious bits of engineering at the same time. But I certainly don't build them like conventional engineering. In fact, I'm really a bit of a dinosaur. So this is my workshop, not an industrial unit. It's in the middle of the country, and this is where I spend most of my time. My metal shop, not a CNC tool in sight. But actually, I designed almost all the machine standing up in here. I don't do much drawing. I like to work with my hands and play with physical prototypes. So in a way, my talk is more about creative design than learning, though it is also how I learn. So I have to start somewhere, though. So I do some drawing. This was basically the initial drawing. And you can see the scene of Granny in the middle as still there, and the handle to turn on the left. But practically everything else has changed. Everything else changed during the process of making it. So what I need is some physical way to get stuck in. I like working with my hands. In this case, I made this rig to experiment how I could make the handle progressively harder to turn. And it's actually quite simple. I'm turning the handle on the right. The cylindrical silver cylinder, that's a big DC motor that's acting as the generator, connected to the variable resistor, the long cylindrical thing to the left of it. And what I was hoping was that increasing the current being generated by reducing the resistance across it would make it harder to turn. And this is one of those rare things. It worked almost first time. So at 2 amps, it was quite easy to turn the handle. By the time I reduced the resistance to make the current up to 6 amps, it was almost impossible. So buoyed by that success, I went on and made another prototype. I should say, though, that that's very unusual that things work first time. And I've been doing it so long that actually it's more interesting now when things don't work, because that's when I learn more, is with being forced to play around with stuff. Anyway, I shortcutted that one this time. I went on to build like this plywood shell to see what shape the machine would be, what size the granny scene would be, what height the handle should be to be comfortable, and viewing angles for kids. That's why the floor of the granny scene is so steeply sloping, which made a sort of interesting false perspective. So by then I was excited by the whole idea and went on to commit myself for the next few months to making it, and I decided to start by making Granny herself. So this was Granny to start with, 2D, just to see how she fitted in the space. Then a cardboard model with drawing pins, because not clear in the video, but as it gets colder, she sort of gradually crouches closer and closer to her fire. So next I made a model out of roof insulation, of the foam, bits stuck together with hot glue. And that was really to work out this strange false perspective. The armchair ends up as a very weird shape if you see it from any other angle. And at that point, then I could actually make the final thing, which is made out of wood. Well, doing all that took a month or so, making Granny. But of course, my brain doesn't stop thinking about the rest of it. And it's a very good time to think about it, rather than just trying to think about it in abstract before we start. I like, because I don't have to think about it all the time. My brain can wander and I can come back to it and go away again. But one really important thing that stuck was that I realized that cranking that handle somehow seemed symbolic of green energy. It was quite hard work and low tech. sort of equivalent in a way to sort of organic farming. I needed something equally symbolic for the fossil fuels, because on that initial drawing there was no petrol pump. I had no idea of that. But the petrol pump just seemed the obvious candidate, just sort of all that fuel. When you fill up your car, it's something like 63 gigawatts going into the speed of pouring all that petrol into your car. So that seemed like the perfect candidate. So I bought one on eBay, and I just loved it. It's such a, oh, you can't really see it in that one. This was the first rig we tried, mounting it outside the machine. Making prototypes is actually very quick because in the rest of that thatched barn is largely stores, stuff I've accumulated over 40 years. And so there's almost always enough stuff to try something out quickly. It's also a sort of memory map so that it reminds me, all my stores, of bits, different ways of components to solve problems and that sort of thing. Anyway, this didn't work out. There were too many practical problems. So I left it for a week, and actually it was, my assistant, Bill, came in one day and he said, "Oh, you're being too literal about this, Tim. The pump can be permanently in the filler hole, as it is here, and you may be able to just see the hinge at the top of the, above the pump. So it all swings out from that point." And this meant that the whole machine could be inside the footprint of the machine. It could have a door, so you didn't know it was there until the moment of surprise. So then we built the whole steel frame for it. Again, in engineering work, you don't do that till you absolutely know where everything's going to go. We didn't at this time, and we did have to change it a bit. But, you know, I'm in the workshop with all the tools. It only took us a couple of hours to change it. It's just not the way that people do things these days. Anyway, this triggered another change, is that I thought I could see that at the moment the petrol pump swung out, it's going to be fun. But to make the most of it, I felt the whole machine should look ecological until that moment. So looking at these sort of trendy green cafes, I thought that we should make the cladding out of recycled timber with green trim and rusty wood. And so that's really where the final appearance of the machine came from on the outside. The last thing for the exterior of the machine was the sign at the top, which was again just a sort of serendipity. Working with, as I always do with physical prototypes, I just cut these letters out very roughly with steel with my hand plasma cutter, just to wonder what to do. And I actually rather liked them, and somehow they stuck, even though I think they look a bit more gothic horror than eco. But anyway, so there's another 2 months or so doing all the electrics and programming the computer and stuff. The whole process took 5 or 6 months, I suppose, and got it on the pier for my pier arcade for the summer holidays. So my process, it really is all based on working with my hands. I think it just suits some people more than others. But I think it is very powerful. I don't understand it logically, but I know every morning that I know what the next thing I need to do, but I don't know how to do it. And I think there's no point in drawing this. I just need to go out there and do it. And I don't know. I suppose it's something that evolves, and it just comes naturally to some people. So I was one of those kids who was bored at school and always longing to get home to start making something again. But I think this sort of idea of working with your hands is, some people talk about thinking with your hands, and it does feel like that sometimes, that my hands almost seem to take over, and well, my mind's drifting onto something else. But perhaps it's not surprising. I mean, there's so much of our brain that is actually dedicated to hand-eye-brain coordination. This is a rather old-fashioned way of looking at the brain, but it shows there's an awful lot of the cortex is into this sort of coordination and thinking about it. I mean, with robots, it's one thing they're absolutely hopeless at. Well, our hands are so much more versatile and fast, and yeah, no computer can go anywhere near us. So in a way, it could be argued that people who sit at a computer, engineers sitting at the computer all day, are just not using half their brain. But I'm not qualified to say that. So really, I just make things the way because I enjoy it. So, oh, I'm ahead of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Heather King and I am a professor of science education. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me here today. It's wonderful to be in your beautiful city. I too live in a beautiful city. I live and work in London. Some of you may have been to London before and recognise that it's a wee bit more squashed than perhaps the metro here in Milan. But even in a very squashed situation like this on the London Tube, I think it's possible to find moments of joy and creativity. For over about 40 years now, there has been an organisation called Poems on the Underground that has placed poems on the tube, right next to the adverts. So instead of watching the adverts, you can appreciate, you can read a poem about the Thames, for example. And for me, this is a real moment of joy and calm and relaxation, because I think that poems allow you to essentially escape, okay, to really to think, to have emotions, to maybe laugh, to cry, to think deeply. And most importantly, I think these creative moments, these snapshot moments, allow you to think about the world. Put yourself in someone else's shoes and think more deeply about the world. Now I'm going to come back to this idea about poetry and creativity and thinking about the world as I go on. But there's another place in London that I think is great for creativity. Some of you may know this as well. So this is the Natural History Museum in London. And I would say that it is a monument to creativity, a cathedral to creativity, if you like. Creativity of nature, of evolution. Okay? And as I am a researcher, I have the privilege of conducting some of my research in this museum. I study the interactions between museum explainers and children and try and understand what's happening. And one day, a museum explainer was engaging with a young girl on this particular exhibit. And the museum explainer had been taught to really encourage the student to look closely, to think about what they could see with this particular specimen, and saying, what do you see? What do you think? And one of the questions is, what do you think it might be? And the child, looking at this lovely specimen of branched Acropora, I think it's from the Indo-Pacific, said, I think it's a pink fairy castle. So I was really intrigued by this idea because there are some parallels, maybe. Ooh. Okay. You could see that there was something going on here. The child was clearly being really imaginative, thinking about what this could possibly be. And I like the idea of it as well because I could see that this is, if you like, the sediment of a coral reef. The coral polyps live in this. It's a bit like a castle maybe, but it wasn't really speaking to the natural history learning objectives that the explainer had in mind. And I was intrigued. I didn't want to lose the creativity, but I wanted to teach about the ecology, the ecosystem of coral reefs. Fortunately, around this time, I'd come across the work of Margaret Wertheim and her development of crochet coral reefs. And I took this idea back to the teaching that I do at the university. And this is where I teach student teachers. And what we did here is we made our own coral reefs. And we did this in order to have some creative expression, but also to engage with the biology of reef systems. Now, our reef system didn't quite look like this. I had to pinch this from the internet, but you get an idea of what it would be like if you put all our different crocheted coral reefs together. And it was a real exciting opportunity to be creative, but also speak about natural history. Now, my maths colleagues got even more excited because they could see the potential in these structures to not only engage creatively, but to do some really fancy maths. Now, if any of you are mathematicians in the audience, you'll recognize that these structures allow you to do hyperbolic geometry and not just Euclidean geometry. Okay, so Euclidean geometry is the geometry you do on flat paper. Hyperbolic is the maths you do on spheres, on spherical shapes, and on shapes like this. And crochet is better than knitting and any other craft for creating these structures, and it's super easy to do. My maths colleagues were excited because of the maths involved. We were excited because the students were engaging in creative expression with their hands, but I was even more excited because I saw the potential in this to also begin to think about wider global messages. Now, the decimation of coral reefs is a long way from most London children's experiences. However, it is still possible to begin to explore these ideas, these important global threats and ideas, by creating a bleached coral reef display, and to display that in your school. This was made by teachers and children, and to use that, it makes a powerful educative message. So we've continued this work. We've tried to combine creativity, STEM, science and maths, and these notions of what's going on in the wider world in our teaching of trainee teachers. And all our training now tries to include both aspects. So this is an example where we've made plant dyes. Chemistry, tick. We've done symmetry, maths, to create these host of butterflies in order to also discuss the decline of insect species in British gardens. We've borrowed from this museum and the Exploratorium to create our own chain reaction exhibit. But this is the maker space in our own university, and this is our student teachers trying to make the chain reaction. And essentially what we've tried to do is to bring a wider message here. And so we've looked at doing the course of a river and picked out, as the river goes from the top all the way down to the sea, picked out issues of what would happen if there's a dam, water pollution, over farming, pesticides, urban pollution, flooding, and used that as our method to engage with wider issues. We made a COVID clock. So you might recognize the lateral flow tests. You haven't seen these for a while, or maybe they're coming back. But very simple motor. It does actually work. And some of you might see that there's only one test here that was positive. So we did quite well in my house. I think it's 7 o'clock was the only one that was positive in that whole period. But this was a chance to really begin to explain the impact of COVID, what was happening, and why it was a problem for us. Lego, simple, basis for a debate. This is the students were trying to use some Lego pieces to then talk about solar panels and use this as a backdrop for a bigger debate, the creative part, but also the important social dimension. Okay, so as well as making, we also thinking very thoughtfully about, we don't just want to make and create. The planet does not need more stuff. We also need to repair. And here is where we started to think about repairing and how we could do that creatively. We used the Japanese art of sashiko and explored how we could mend in a creative manner. But we got the STEM in as well. We got the maths in. So these on this side, we've borrowed from the work of Australian mathematician Catherine Seaton to create our own patches of embroidery. And these are random numbers, but they've been turned into their binary and base 3 form, bear with me, to create the different structures. So you sew a line or not, depending on whether it's in the binary or base 3 number. Here we have recurring decimals, and over there it's the Fibonacci number as well. And this is my friend, my colleague at work's husband's shirt. So we're trying to repair and use all what we can. But again, we're trying to build in the maths, the creative expression, but talking about why we're bothering with repair and what to do about it. Building on that idea of repair and sort of speaking out, showing what we're doing, we are inspired by, votes for women a long time ago, 100 years ago, and more recently, these sorts of speaking out about green issues, very creative ways of making a point there. We've tried to develop our own protest songs and banners. Okay, and this is the audience participation bit. This is a song that our student teachers wrote, and I'd like you to see if anyone can spot what they think this is to the tune of. Taylor Swift, thank you. Okay, and that was from a slightly older person in the audience, I think. So, yeah, well done. Okay, so I think...
Climate change is taking hold. Oh no, climate change is taking hold. Oh no, and it's caused by CO2. And we know that much is true. But what is it we should do? What is it we should do? We're in a complex system of capitalism, global ecosystems and populations. It's gonna be alright, cause the climate's gonna change.
Okay.
Covered in the ways. The weather's gonna change.
So, it was a creative expression, and the students had a whirl of a time. But we've also invited the students to be part of material that we publish. This is a teaching resource. These are some of the students' drawings that accompany their essays in a resource. So we're trying to share those ideas for other teachers as well. Okay, I'm coming to the end, and we've talked quite a lot about my students, and I'm thinking, what about me? Why don't we talk about me for a change? So remember at the beginning, I said that I am inspired by poetry, and I feel that it's a chance to think outside, to think about other people, to think about wider issues. And I was inspired by this poem. When I'm an old woman, I shall wear purple. And I used the first line of this poem to create my own poem that I've also used as a manifesto. Essentially, I use this poem in every meeting I go into in work, in every teaching that I do now. I have to rattle the cages. I have to rock the boat. I have to disobey the status quo. I have to learn to sit with discomfort, because I need to be shouting today, highlighting issues and demanding action. and I'm talking about social justice issues and environmental justice issues, urge colleagues and students to stop, to consider, to not continue turning a blind eye. And it doesn't matter if I feel self-conscious. I need to do more so it no longer feels odd, but becomes normal and change happens. So this was, just wanted to finish, this is my attempt in a conference about creativity to still put myself out there and to say that we need to be really thinking about global issues, about climate change, environmental justice and social justice, even when we're doing STEM, and we need to do so in a creative way. Thank you.
No, non mi serve. Grazie. Buongiorno a tutte e a tutti, parlerò italiano e vi porterò i risultati di circa un quarto di secolo di tentativi di capire tra scienze cognitive e neuroscienze che cosa riusciamo a dire della creatività umana. Questo è il tema che mi sono dato e il titolo è "Nonostante tutto siamo capaci di creare". E quindi il problema è cercare di capire che cosa sappiamo, ancora molto poco, attraverso la ricerca scientifica della nostra distinzione specie specifica, pare che sia solo una distinzione di Sapiens, quella di creare dal nulla, cioè di creare l'inedito, e che rapporto ci sia fra la creatività e l'apprendimento. Sappiamo molto poco di questo e tuttavia il paradigma che noi usiamo, naturalmente come potete capire, è un paradigma corporeo, cioè partiamo dal corpo, cervello, mente e la nostra ipotesi è che la capacità creativa di noi umani nasca dalla nostra corporeità, dalla nostra evoluzione e in particolare da alcuni aspetti di noi stessi che cercheremo di focalizzare in questi pochi minuti, naturalmente. Partiamo da un esempio, poi prego di proiettare un testo che abbiamo appena pubblicato con il mio amico e collega Vittorio Gallese, che contiene buona parte delle cose che cercherò di dire e che è dedicato in particolare ai ragazzini e alle ragazzine, cioè agli adolescenti. Ebbene, partiamo da un esempio. A me piacciono molto le tele di ragno e immagino che anche a qualcuna di voi o a qualcuno di voi piacciono le tele di ragno. È difficile fotografarle, ci provo continuamente ma con scarsi risultati, e tuttavia io non saprei in nessun modo come fare a fare qualcosa di simile. Si tratta di artefatti particolarmente belli, particolarmente significativi. Ma c'è un ma. Noi non conosciamo, almeno io non so voi, un nonno ragno che in questo momento stia portando un nipotino ragno in un museo delle tele di ragno a vedere le tele di ragno che si facevano un secolo fa, 2 secoli fa, 3 secoli fa. Questa distinzione di Sapiens è la cosa che ossessiona la nostra ricerca. Come abbiamo fatto ad arrivare fino a qui? La prima condizione che noi individuiamo e sulla quale studiamo è il comportamento simbolico. Noi siamo capaci di concepire un oggetto e un fenomeno in sua assenza. Se vi dico che ho bevuto un caffè prima di venire qua, voi capite esattamente cosa ho fatto, senza che io abbia né una tazzina né il suo contenuto, e questo non è possibile per un altro essere di un'altra specie. Non sto accreditando qui una superiorità di Sapiens, non è questo, sto mettendo in evidenza una distinzione della nostra specie. un colibrì vola a 120 km all'ora in un ambiente impervio, questa è una cosa che non so neanche immaginare. E quindi noi abbiamo delle distinzioni specie specifiche come le hanno le nostre specie. Le formiche costruiscono una forma organizzativa particolarmente significativa in un formicaio, spesso le usiamo come esempi del comportamento umano in un'organizzazione, ma Wilson, che ha studiato tutta la vita le formiche, ci dice non fatelo, perché le formiche eseguono catene di routine. Noi siamo capaci di dire di no, cioè di creare una forma che ancora non c'è. E questo è il nostro problema. Da dove viene questa nostra capacità? Come si è prodotta nel corso del tempo? Prima condizione, ripeto, è il comportamento simbolico, cioè la capacità di creare mondi paralleli. La fiction, la finzione non è un inganno, la finzione è fare come se. Quando un bambino va a cavallo di un manico di scopa, fingendo che sia il cavallo, sa benissimo che non è un cavallo, ma sta operando a livello di mondi intermedi, il manico di scopa e la simbolizzazione del manico di scopa che lui in quel momento crea come se fosse un cavallo. Questa capacità umana è, come ripeto, la nostra ossessione, cioè stiamo cercando di capire da dove si produce. Ebbene, una cosa che abbiamo capito, che cos'è? Che noi conosciamo per selezione, riconoscimento, rientro. Voi in questo momento state selezionando le cose che io dico, cioè in italiano la parola è molto felice perché è polisemica, in parte state scegliendo, in parte state scartando quello che dico. Che cosa selezionate nel senso di scegliere? Ciò che riuscite a connettere con il vostro patrimonio di conoscenze disponibili e quello che rimarrà, spero qualcosa di ciò che vi sto dicendo, sarà il rientro, quello che voi avrete fatto vostro in questo processo. Questo si produce attraverso un meccanismo di mind wandering, per cui le nostre strutture frontali e parietali raccolgono i segnali. Questi segnali si distribuiscono nel cervello quando non vengono selezionati, cioè scartati all'ingresso, o perché non ci interessano, o perché ci disturbano, o perché emotivamente non ci raggiungono. Ebbene, tutto questo cosa produce? Produce un processo in base al quale noi riusciamo a fare un'operazione di particolare rilevanza, che è la provvisoria definizione della creatività a cui siamo arrivati fino ad ora, cioè la capacità specie specifica di noi umani di comporre e ricomporre in modi a volte, almeno in parte originali, i repertori del mondo. Come si produce un processo di questo genere? Dal 1991-92, in particolare grazie agli studi del mio compagno di percorso, Vittorio Gallese e il suo gruppo a Parma, noi sappiamo che il nostro sistema cerebrale, non solo il nostro, ma quello dei roditori, quello degli uccelli, è dotato di apparati neuronali, cioè degli 86 miliardi circa delle cellule del nostro cervello, una parte di queste cellule svolgono una funzione mirror, cioè una funzione specchio, i cosiddetti, per usare la metafora con cui vengono citati, neuroni specchio. Che funzione svolgono queste cellule? Queste cellule permettono di produrre un processo di embodied simulation, cioè di risonanza incarnata con i segni del mondo e con gli altri, in modo tale che noi siamo in grado a livello prelinguistico, quindi subcorticale, prevolontario e preintenzionale, di conoscere quello che l'altro sta facendo, di capirlo prima che ce lo dica, cioè il cosiddetto processo empatico. Questo processo empatico, che non ha niente a che fare con l'essere buoni o l'essere cattivi, è semplicemente un processo neurofisiologico che si sviluppa nelle relazioni con gli altri e che può produrre la nostra capacità di sentire quello che l'altro sente per aiutarlo, per esempio, o di sentire quello che l'altro sente per torturarlo. Il meccanismo è lo stesso, la scelta è una scelta sociale. Questo processo che cosa genera? Genera la capacità, in alcuni casi, di sollevare gli oggetti e le cose da dove se ne stanno e di rivestirli di un processo simbolico, cioè di un particolare significato, cioè l'embodied simulation, il processo di risonanza tra noi gli altri e noi e il mondo, normalmente funziona. In alcune circostanze siamo in grado di sperimentare, in particolare gli artisti, in particolare i creativi, ma tutti noi siamo in grado di far questo, di sperimentare una risonanza particolarmente riuscita che è in grado di far sentire a noi, a partire da quello stimolo, qualcosa che fino a quel punto non avevamo mai sentito e che solleviamo da dove se ne stava, artificandola. Si chiama processo di artification. Questo processo è un processo che accompagna tutta la nostra vita fin dalla nascita. Se avete visto quello che fa un neonato mentre succhia il latte dal seno materno, voi avrete visto che c'è molto spesso la piccola mano che accarezza il seno da cui sta succhiando il latte. Quel processo è un processo originario di carattere sensoriale che dà vita ad un'estetica della relazione con l'oggetto, l'esperienza estetica, cioè l'esperienza sensibile. Il processo fra creatività ed esperienza estetica è un processo particolarmente connesso, cioè quel processo che porta noi all'estetizzazione del mondo. Agli artisti riesce di fare questo ad un livello supremo, ma ognuno di noi è capace di comporre e ricomporre i repertori del mondo e di farlo in maniera almeno in parte originale. Lo facciamo sistematicamente nella scienza, quando formuliamo un'ipotesi a proposito di un fenomeno che prima non c'era, istituendo una discontinuità e rompendo la cornice nella quale fino a quel momento ci eravamo mossi. Costruiamo una cornice tolemaica e tutto il mondo crede in questa cornice e non dubita di questa cornice. Dopodiché si formula un'ipotesi che le cose non stiano così e con molta fatica cambiamo la cornice. C'è un sistema di resistenza alla creatività di cui dobbiamo tenere conto. Sapete quanta fatica c'è stata per produrre l'affermazione di un modello copernicano e galileiano del sistema solare. A Galileo è costata addirittura la biura. Questo è poi l'insieme degli ostacoli che si frappongono tra noi e la capacità creativa. E qui interviene il tema dell'educazione. Io ho avuto la fortuna di studiare con Heinz von Förster e Heinz, fondatore del Biological Computing Laboratory, Università di California, eccetera. Heinz mi raccontava un aneddoto particolarmente significativo su questo a proposito del rapporto fra creatività e learning, cioè apprendimento. Lui ha avuto un figlio che tuttora insegna matematica negli Stati Uniti. Heinz era figlio di una sorella di Ludwig Wittgenstein, quindi lui ha chiamato questo figlio Ludwig. Ebbene, un giorno questo bambino è tornato a scuola in prima elementare piangendo e il papà gli ha chiesto che cosa è successo e il bambino ha detto: ho preso un brutto voto in aritmetica. E siccome era nato e aveva il genio della matematica, lui ha detto: com'è possibile che tu abbia preso un brutto voto in aritmetica? Com'è andata? E lui ha detto: la maestra ha chiesto quanto fa 3 per 2. Io ho alzato subito la mano e ho detto: fa 3 più 3. La maestra mi ha dato un brutto voto, perché canonicamente alla domanda si risponde 6. Ecco, questa è una questione fondamentale che dobbiamo avere presente quando parliamo del rapporto fra la capacità creativa e l'apprendimento. Nel senso che noi non lavoriamo per favorire questo con l'educazione, ma lavoriamo principalmente per confermare i canoni e questo lo facciamo in ogni campo. A partire da queste premesse, quindi, di che cosa stiamo parlando quando parliamo di creatività? Ripeto, parliamo di un processo di cui siamo capaci come specie e per quello che ne sappiamo fino ad ora non appartiene ad altre specie, cioè la capacità di istituire discontinuità in un paradigma innovando il paradigma stesso. E lo facciamo in ogni campo, come ho cercato di dire prima. Il processo che si produce a livello mentale, a livello corpo-cervello-mente, è un processo di risonanza incarnata che è in grado di produrre una estetizzazione, quindi un artification degli oggetti o delle cose o delle idee, in modo tale da produrre tutto questo. La responsabilità educativa qual è? È quella di immaginare che mentre l'apprendimento si muove all'interno di una cornice e quindi si avvale di problem solving e cose di questo genere, il vero problema della creatività è il dubbio sulla cornice e quindi l'esercizio del dubbio e la capacità di generare un processo educativo che sia capace di attivare pensiero critico, noi abbiamo un bisogno enorme, come abbiamo sentito anche dalle relazioni precedenti in questo nostro tempo, e di sviluppare questa distinzione della specie, soprattutto perché viviamo un'epoca nella quale il mondo e la cornice nella quale abbiamo costruito il mondo in cui viviamo è palesemente fallito e quindi un'epoca nella quale abbiamo un'urgenza assoluta di creare l'inedito. Questa capacità ce l'abbiamo. Ce l'abbiamo, ma è condizione fondamentale per praticarla un processo educativo che favorisca un apprendimento creativo. C'è un aneddoto di Paul Václavic, che mi onoro di aver avuto insegnante, grande studioso della comunicazione umana, che in un libro che si chiama Change, appunto, riporta questo aforisma. Disse lo sceicco al servo: vuoi andare dalla Mecca a Medina col cavallo o col cammello? Rispose il servo: vorrei discutere se andare o no dalla Mecca a Medina. Tutte le volte che noi scegliamo tra cavallo e cammello, stiamo scegliendo in un frame già dato. Questo processo è certamente un processo di apprendimento particolarmente utile per la nostra specie, ma non è sufficiente per parlare di rapporto fra creatività e apprendimento. Il processo di breakdown che genera l'inedito ha bisogno di una sollecitazione della nostra capacità creativa sulla quale l'educazione può fare molto. E quindi la questione che ne deriva immediatamente qual è? Che dobbiamo valorizzare particolarmente alcune nostre caratteristiche. L'azione, per esempio, il rapporto con gli oggetti, per esempio, la possibilità di utilizzare gli spazi o un museo come questo per lo sviluppo di un rapporto diretto con l'azione, ma soprattutto la capacità sperimentale. Come è noto a tutti, e in particolare in questo tempo in Italia in cui noi siamo particolarmente fortunati per il Ministero dell'Istruzione che abbiamo in questo momento, è necessario mettere in discussione l'istruzionismo, riconoscendo, e concludo, che noi apprendiamo per selezione, riconoscimento, rientro, non apprendiamo per istruzionismo, non apprendiamo per trasmissione del sapere. Se stanno registrando quello che dico, la macchina starà registrando, se non è rotta, esattamente ciò che dico, ma nulla di tutto questo sta accadendo fra me e voi. Voi state selezionando, riconoscendo e, auspicabilmente per me, facendo rientrare qualcosa delle cose che vi ho detto. Quindi, se vogliamo un rapporto efficace fra creatività e apprendimento, dobbiamo educare alla creatività. Grazie.
Grazie mille al professor Morelli. Invito anche gli altri relatori. I'm going to invite everyone on stage. We have a little bit of like 20 minutes, abbiamo circa 20 minuti per una chiacchierata rapida.
Non abbiamo abbastanza sedie.
Oh, we need an extra chair, which I see over there. Let's be creative. Possiamo... o magari voi vi sedete, io sto in piedi, che devo crescere.
Ecco, cresci un po'.
Is it Tim? Okay, it's getting...
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for all this inspiration. I'll keep speaking in English. Thank you for the inspiration. I love how we started with Luigi discussing and discovering that learning was not transmission, and Professor Morelli is closing with the same idea. And in between, I've seen so much of examples of creativity from your own creativity, coming up with very interesting machines or crafts and using these projects to really engage in a creative process yourself. And at the same time, I see people enabling others and in being creative. And again, like the words of Professor Morelli are like in my mind in terms of education is a way to stimulate this innate kind of like tendency to create and to make an aesthetic experience out of what we do. So I'm going to invite everyone to keep asking questions through the app that you can access using your QR code. But I have already a couple of questions here. So I think Chiara asked a couple of questions. I'm going to try to summarize. I think she talks about an episode in which a kid at school made a damage, so did something dangerous. So I will ask this to Gever, like breaking a smart board. And it's interesting how the teacher decided to instead of punishing, the teacher decided to fix the board with the kid. The question is, these are rare examples. You know, this doesn't happen all the time. Punishment is usually something that is like preferred to repair.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, and how can we make this approach of repairing, which also connects to what Heather was talking, like how can we shift from punishment to repairing?
Well, I think first off, that is a great example of the proper response, is that the accidental destruction of a piece of property opens up an opportunity for a conversation about what we value and why we treat these objects with respect. But I also think there might have been more learning going on as they tried to figure out how to repair it together than there would be if we had taught a course on projector repair. So I wholeheartedly approve of this approach. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like also to hear from Heather, Professor King.
So there is a sort of think piece that we use in education, which is along the lines of, if you teach young people to be scared or dislike science and maths, then rather than to engage with their feelings, and they may be happy or they may be fearful, but to at least acknowledge those feelings, if you don't allow that engagement with feelings, then you are essentially denying the purposes of education. So, you know, being scared, being worried, being upset, they are valid feelings, and we should acknowledge those and work with them and do the repair together. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I add something? I also feel that learning happens in relationship. It happens in the relationship that you have with your educator, with your peers, with the phenomenon that you're learning, and with yourself. And this response is maintaining a relationship that's collaborative between the educator and the student, whereas punishment breaks that relationship. So that's what I like the most about it. It's a choice to stay in relationship.
That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I'm reading a question that comes from Elvira for Professor Morelli. So I'm going to ask this question in Italian. Lei lega la creatività alla capacità di ragionare per simboli e a sua volta la capacità di mirroring attraverso i neuroni specchio. Ma se i neuroni specchio o diciamo l'architettura del cervello è simile in altri animali, perché la creatività è specifica dell'uomo? So why is creativity specific of humans?
Grazie. Questa è la domanda che noi temiamo di più. E quindi io non sono in grado di far mio quell'avverbio. Perché? Posso dirle qualcosa del come ciò accade, ma il perché rimane appannaggio della filosofia. Il come accade invece è materia della nostra ricerca e sappiamo ancora molto poco per poter esprimere delle risposte esaustive. Non è vero che non sappiamo niente. La struttura neocorticale del nostro cervello, che come è noto si è prodotta nel corso dell'evoluzione, ha fatto in modo che, esemplifichiamo su un esempio che conoscono tutti dal punto di vista paleoantropologico, il cervello di Lusi, 3.250.000 anni fa, pesava, non l'abbiamo più e non ne abbiamo neanche, abbiamo solo il cranio e possiamo farne il calco, circa 730 grammi. Mentre il nostro cervello, quello medio di un Homo sapiens o donna sapiens, pesa circa 1,3 kg. Il raddoppio delle dimensioni del cervello è dovuto soprattutto a uno sviluppo particolarmente significativo che si è prodotto dal tempo di Lusi a circa 2 milioni di anni fa, del nostro cervello. Questo raddoppio è il risultato dello sviluppo della neocorteccia. La struttura neocorticale, cioè quella struttura arricciata, che se la stirassimo sarebbe larga circa 2 metri quadrati, è la parte fondamentale del nostro cervello. È quella che permette di fare una conferenza come questa, è quella che permette di fare scuola, è quella che permette di gestire le relazioni, come veniva detto prima, con una modalità che è accompagnata da processi simbolici. Quindi noi siamo diventati simbolici, non lo eravamo. Noi coincidevamo con la nostra esperienza, come possiamo vedere facendo un esperimento per esempio con una rana, forse richiamare un esperimento ci aiuta. Se noi prendiamo una rana che dal punto di vista delle potenzialità comportamentali e retiniche mi batte clamorosamente, nel senso che se io fossi rana guardando lì vedrei persino i miei compagni seduti qua, e invece così non è. La rana ha uno spettro visivo molto più ampio del mio, ha una lingua prensile che io non ho. Ecco, lanciamo alla rana delle mosche, perché la affamiamo un po', e lei le prenderà con la lingua e le mangerà. Però abbiamo mescolato, siccome siamo un po' cattivi come sperimentatori, alle mosche, in termini gestaltici, dei piccoli sassolini che hanno il colore delle mosche. La rana prende il sassolino, poi lo sputa. Dopodiché ricomincia a mangiare le mosche. Quando le rilanciamo un sassolino, lo riprende. Noi no. Noi siamo capaci di concepire la differenza fra il sassolino e la mosca, non consegnandoci alla sua forma. Questo come è successo? È successo soprattutto perché da un certo momento in poi abbiamo cominciato a produrre azioni inutili. Abbiamo cominciato a dipingere le pareti rupestri delle grotte, abbiamo cominciato a seppellire i morti. Perché si seppellisce un morto? Non c'è un altro essere che seppellisce i morti della propria specie. Abbiamo cominciato a seppellire i morti perché siamo divenuti capaci progressivamente di concepire mondi che non esistono, di storie parallele. Topolino esiste nella mente di ognuno di noi, Madame Bovary esiste nella mente di ognuno di noi, e quindi questa capacità di fiction, cioè di finzione, si è prodotta per uno sviluppo neurofisiologico accompagnato essenzialmente da un altro aspetto, che è la nostra capacità relazionale cooperativa, cioè è la capacità imitativa. Quando abbiamo visto un nostro antenato montare un pezzo di selce su un bastone per potenziare la propria capacità di cacciare, noi da quel momento in poi non abbiamo avuto più lo stesso cervello di prima, perché l'oggetto prodotto modifica neuroplasticamente il cervello del produttore. Questo vale dall'asta fino allo smartphone. Questa dimensione ci deve accompagnare, ma il processo cooperativo, nel bene e nel male, è quello che ha prodotto le dimensioni mimetiche che hanno potenziato, purtroppo fino alla nostra distruttività attuale, la capacità della specie. Il nostro problema oggi, e concludo, è chiederci se saremo capaci di usare il nostro linguaggio verbale articolato e la nostra competenza simbolica per non autodistruggerci. Questo è il nostro problema.
Grazie, questa è una interessante provocazione. It was interesting to hear how our ability to think conceptually and symbolically is what characterizes us as human. But I'm fascinated by how these ideas and concepts then translate into something you can touch, you can make, that people can use. And I'm thinking of of Tim's inventions, and I'm thinking, you said many things that are really resonating. For example, thinking with your hands, or engaging, like thinking and making with your hands. And I would like you to elaborate a little bit on what does that mean, what does that look like to think with your hands. But also I have a broader question, like on a more personal question, like how did you become an inventor? Because that's like I'll leave both questions on the table.
Well, I think a lot of kids spend their lives making things. I was just one of those kids, and when I was really, the one that really stuck was that I bought we used to have these things called jumble sales in Britain. And I bought a tin toy that had stopped working. It was a little radar station. And it wasn't working, so I took it to bits. But there was a screen, and behind the screen there was a disc, a metal disc with cutouts of planes, and behind that was a light bulb. So it shone images of the planes going across the screen. That was what it was supposed to do. Anyway, I took it all to bits, and I got the motor working, and the light bulb, well, no, the light bulb had gone. I got the motor working, and I made a lot of things out of shoe boxes and sellotape. And I put this motor and the disc in the lid of a shoebox. And then I cut a hole in the end of it, and then I dangled little bits and pieces off the disc, little bits of string, bits of chain, all sorts of things I could find lying around. And this became a foot-tickling machine. And the great thing about this was that everybody I tried it on either roared with laughter or screamed. And I realised at that point that this is much the best thing to make, things to entertain people. So really, ever since, that's what I've liked doing. I'm more of a showman than an artist or an engineer in a way, though I do like my brain thinks in that sort of engineering sort of way. So that was the frustration of formal education. I mean, I did an engineering degree, but it was so theoretical, it just didn't help me make the sort of things I wanted to make. It was all, I mean, I enjoyed the maths. I scraped through school because I could do the maths quite effortlessly. I wasn't engaged, but I could slide under the radar. And I would still say, I mean, I think the useful thing about school is learning to get on with other kids, and not what the teachers teach you. So anyway, I emerged from that, and really what I wanted to get better at making things. So I think my ambition was to be a jack of all trades, to learn a bit of everything. And it's much harder than getting a degree, I can tell you that, but more satisfying, because learning practical skills like sharpening a tool and stuff like that, they're things you don't forget. It's things like riding a bike. They're things, you know, all the facts go in one ear and come out another ear, but these physical things, they sort of stick. And then with the arcade machines, it's watching people's reactions, watching people enjoy them. Going back to the foot-tickling machine, it's addictive. It keeps me at it. And, it's also a one-way process. I can't stop myself getting more and more ambitious about the technology I use, which is rash, really, because the more complicated they get, the more harder they are to maintain in the long term. But I don't know if that answers your question really, but
well, it's definitely an inspiring, trajectory, and I love how you use the humor in your creations and what you said about that.
I think other people are definitely. It's not people like the jokes in the machines, but I think it's the approach is also. Touches quite a lot of people. I mean, my YouTube channel's got, 120-something thousand subscribers, so I'm not entirely alone in being a dinosaur.
Thank you. I have questions, about like how do we help people, especially in schools. I see many questions are related to schools, and Professor King told us a little bit and showed us a little bit of what her student teachers are doing. So I have, again, many questions about that, and I would just leave it open to you to choose. But one question is, what is hard, in school? Like how can this approach be used? And I see some of the teachers here asking how can we do it in the short times that we have in schools? I bet you encountered this issue and many others in your work and with your student teachers' work. Can you say a little bit more about how do we do that in schools?
So, firstly, you might think of doing these things as a after-school or a lunchtime club, because that would give you an opportunity to practice and it's your own time, and you're not constrained by the curriculum, by the bell, by the clock. That would be a chance to practice these ideas. But once you have practiced them, then you have more confidence to bring them into your general classroom. So, for example, once you've got good at crocheting a coral, okay, some of our student teachers now allow their children in their class to be crocheting in the lesson. It's a very simple thing to do, and it keeps their hands occupied. They can still be listening, and they're adding to the display. We've not only done coral reefs, we've done other scenes as well. But we allow those sorts of different approaches to happen simultaneously, because we also teach that it's very important to acknowledge that learning is both the abstract, the symbolic, as you were saying, but it's also the embodied stuff you do with your hands, and it's the stuff that you feel. And if you're happy and content and relaxed and feel safe and welcome in a space, then all that learning will come together. So the symbolic stuff will happen. The learning by doing, we encourage the practical work, but we also try to make it a safe and welcoming place. Now, I know that exams and the head teacher and parents can often make school a stressful space, but it's a battle to try and keep pushing against those constraints. And it can work, it's just slowly. Or you invent your own school, which I think is what we should do.
Thank you so much. And I'm pretty sure everyone here is already pushing and will keep pushing and also being aware of the emotional aspect. Thank you so much for highlighting that. I have a question actually for Gever in particular. Someone is asking, how, basically it's like, how did for Fab Lab, it happened that it was created a world network of these spaces, where is the Tinkering School network everywhere? Where do you plan to do something in Italy or in the rest of the world?
Yeah. Well, by our estimation, we have helped start over 14 different schools that are inspired by Brightworks. And there are many after school and summer camp experiences that are modeled after Tinkering School, my summer camp. So I haven't tried deliberately to create a network, but only to support. And I invite this audience, if you can get yourselves to San Francisco, you will be my guest at the school. We'll be happy to show you how everything works, and you can come and play with our students and our staff. And I mean that sincerely. Please, if you get to San Francisco, I will be upset with you if you don't text me and let me know you're there, and we can make something happen. But I think we have an opportunity right now in this moment, especially in our country of chaos and negative change, to use this as an opportunity to open the door to positive change. And if you are working with constraints that don't allow you to construct the most beneficial experience for the students you're working with, it's time to push on those constraints. This system of education that we have was not well researched before we forced it on the world. Actually, we have a large body of research that shows that there are better ways to work with students to create longer lasting learning. And one of my favorite pieces of evidence is that high school students that graduate to go to college often have forgotten all of the algebra that they learned in their middle school experiences. Why did we put all that effort into it if it was going to be gone by the time they left the school? So I think this is the moment to start pushing back on some of those constraints. In a country like Italy, where the definition of school comes from the top, we may need to introduce the idea that every school should have a laboratory where they are innovating and encouraged to try alternatives, and we start sharing things that work better across the schools, and that change might come from the bottom and push
That's
upward.
right.
So, revolution.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I?
Please. Yeah.
I think another aspect that I see in common between Brightworks and the Tinkering Studio is that they're both fundamentally research and development labs. The Brightworks that was happening 10 years ago is no longer the Brightworks that's happening today, and in a lot of ways the way we did things 10 years ago in the Tinkering Studio has evolved. And so it makes it, both of these make for different models to share as they are, as templates for somebody else to just adopt. And so I think the best way that we can share this is to be able to articulate the reasons and the practices and the findings from our experimentation so that others can take it in their own context. Italy has a very different context than San Francisco, California when it comes to education. So what are the practices that can be adopted in an Italian context, both in schooling or maybe in a tinkering context?
Thank you. And this is a wonderful question. I see the timer is getting reddish, and I promised to leave the stage like 5 minutes ago. So we're a little... but I want to thank everyone for sharing your beautiful insights and experiences. So I invite everyone to make a big applause, a round of applause to our presenters. They're gonna be around in the next day and a half, 2 days. So please feel free to approach and ask your questions directly, and maybe engage in creative experiences in the workshops that we're gonna be engaged with soon. I think right now, if I remember, there is a group photo we are taking, right? And then we're gonna leave the stage. So don't leave yet. Smile. I don't know, actually, Feda maybe. Okay, so we are.
Sit up straight.
Okay, thank you again,
Thank you very much.
and happy Creative Learning Festival, everyone.